Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Red Raptor Writes. If you've been a subscriber, then you've likely seen my reviews of the Jurassic franchise and all 14 Land Before Time films. The first 10 had plenty of hits in there, with a few duds. After that, total garbage.
What'd he say? Garbage?
But now, I turn my attention to one movie in particular that's gotten a Shrek load of requests, Disney's 2000 release, Dinosaur. I appreciate all the enthusiasm and all the requests I get, so keep them coming. I'll get to them eventually. Dinosaur in particular caught my eye because I too was fond of it as a kid, though never really loved it. Yeah, I threw in the VHS once every few years, and I enjoyed it. Not nearly as much as others like Jurassic Park, Jaws, or several Land Before Times though. Last time I saw this one must have been 10 years ago when showing my close friend Video Gambit. Still waiting on a new upload, buddy. So yeah, it's been a while for me, and even then, I didn't love it. After returning to Disney's Dinosaur, has anything changed? How do I view it now? Before I jump in, I should point out that this will be a film review in terms of entertainment, but this video will be followed up by an accuracy review, so stay tuned for that. Now guys, let's dig this up. After years of indifference towards this movie, I've got to admit that Disney's Dinosaur holds up really well. In the past, I've never been afraid to call out popular media that I think is overrated, but that certainly doesn't apply here. My wife and I had a very good time rewatching this 24 years after release. To start out, all this time later, the CGI is still very impressive. The filmmakers took an approach similar to Jurassic Park and Walking with Dinosaurs before it, where most of the environments were shot in live action, the scenery is really there, yet each animal is added to the footage with computers. Not a revolutionary idea or one that won't be accomplished even better in the future with new technology, but still from a time when CGI was overall not as refined, the amount that the visuals hold up today is shocking. A few shots and character models stand out as less polished, mainly the lemurs, but these are by far the exceptions. As for the character designs themselves, most of them are pretty great from an aesthetic standpoint. Again, we'll deal with accuracy another day. I appreciate how each character is stylized to be slightly cartoony. We get almost a cartoon filter over otherwise realistic looking creatures. It's just the right amount of realism to suit the actual filmed backgrounds, but still allows for more human facial expressions that would normally be unsuitable for dinosaurs. Although scientific accuracy makes my brain hit the happy button, if the visual artist went 100% accurate with them, then the talking and emoting would look ridiculous. I mean, just look at the Lion King remake to see how that went. David Krentz of later Dinosaur Revolution and Walking with 3D fame started his hot streak here. His influence certainly shows in many of the stellar designs. To be fair though, our main protagonist Aladar the Iguanodon begins to approach the uncanny valley sometimes. Because he does the most talking, he and his species have their beaks removed in favor of more human mammalian lips. The result is a human-dinosaur hybrid, which sounds like a terrible idea on paper, but is stylized enough to not be that bad. It's much more tolerable on other iguanodons, Kron and Bruton, who are given more hardcore appearances. Maybe not scientifically accurate to the genus, but the angrier edgelord look takes away from the goofy lips, so for them, I didn't even notice. As for the story itself, I found it surprisingly enjoyable. Very similar to The Land Before Time, a group of dinosaurs surviving the barren waste so they can live to see the greener pastures, though Dinosaur incorporates more than enough of its own ideas, enough twists and turns to stand out. For the rest of the review, I'll be giving a basic plot overview, then go off on long tangents when they become relevant. Get it? Awesome. We start with a pretty awesome intro sequence as we follow the journeys of an iguanodon egg through a fascinating world with spectacular creatures. A wondrous score swells up as this world is open to the audience. James Newton Howard, a Hollywood veteran, composed the soundtrack, along with other underappreciated Disney animations from the same era. Eventually, the egg crashes through the trees of an island where it's greeted by a family of lemurs. The egg will hatch and grow up to be our main protagonist, Aladar the Iguanodon. We get a good sense of their relationship to each other, along with the dino's kindness when he plays with the children and helps young males like Zinni with their game during mating season. Here we can have our first detour, the lemurs. If there are characters to complain about in an otherwise great cast, it would be the lemur family. We spend a decent amount of time with them in the beginning, but once Aladar joins the dinosaur herd later on, they kind of fade into the background. Aside from maybe Pleo, the foster mother, who has some meaningful interactions as kind of a moral compass, their star mainly there to exist, crack jokes. I don't know. I feel like another draft was needed to flesh out their roles in the story. Or maybe give them a send-off after the first act so they don't outlive their usefulness. Sure, the goofy Zinni gets Nero's attention in one scene and moves a few rocks, but nothing all that impactful that couldn't be written out or given to another character. Thankfully, we're not in Hunchback Gargoyle territory where they ruin an otherwise fantastic movie when present, but still, the lemur family comes across as superfluous to the rest of the story in my opinion. After the lemur's big courtship ritual, a meteor slams just over the horizon, bringing devastation to their home. Only escaping with the few on his back, Aladar washes up on the shores of the mainland. Following all that we just went through with him and his adopted family, it's a really big blow. Nearly all the kids and all the males we just saw him spend time with are dead.
Gone. Reduced to atoms.
There's nowhere else for the lemurs and their iguanodon to go. No other family, which may inform the decision to make family along the way. I'll come back to why I like this decision later, but starting Aladar isolated from everyone else brings a welcomed fish out of waterness as he discovers the harsh conditions of the world. His tight-knit familial mentality is starkly contrasted with the more cutthroat, Darwinistic herd he and the lemurs end up joining. At this point, the mixed herd are stuck trekking through a barren wasteland, headed for more lush nesting grounds. And their leaders, Kron, Bruton, and Nera, are willing to sacrifice anyone who can't make the journey at pace, as to not slow down or endanger the strong. The great shall not be constrained by the small, to quote possibly the greatest game of all time. Aladar, as a character, doesn't change much in his beliefs over the film's runtime. There's no grand character arc for him. Some may find it stale, but that's okay with me. Much of the drama comes not from seeing a very flawed character grow, but seeing an already morally established character be tested in his beliefs. Rather than a Batman Begins, we're more in Dark Knight territory. I was invested in the conflict between the Darwinistic survival of the fittest Kron and more compassionate Aladar. The tension is so natural that it basically writes itself. Plus, I appreciate how, although Aladar is the protagonist and he turns out to be right in the end, still some credit is given to Kron where it's due. Though cold, he genuinely does care about the survival of the herd. A brutal journey lies ahead of them, and the giant Carnotaurus in pursuit don't make it any easier. In order to make it to the nesting ground, Kron and Bruton are more than willing to sacrifice the few weaklings. These include two old lady dinosaurs, a Brachiosaurus named Baleen, along with this Styracosaurus Ema. Oh, and there's this little puppy Ankylosaurus Earl who, I don't know, maybe fans love this guy cause a decade later, Disney will continue this lazy trend of turning animal sidekicks into big puppies, cause I don't know how much an audience will care about a reindeer. The Chad Alphas may be right that you can't sacrifice the many for the few, though they take it too far, not seeing the value in these older souls, willfully using them as cannon fodder. Enlightened Aladar understands that all, herbivore life, rather than human life, has inherent value. He takes a chance on Kron's rejects who, at pivotal moments, use their wisdom to save the herd, proving that everyone's life, no matter how old or sick, still has value. Epic, beautiful, Awesome. Another important character is Nira, Kron's sister, who seems to rank maybe third in command here. It's immediately obvious to anyone with 2 brain cells that she's meant to be the love interest. Disney is not subtle at all in this regard. A few times I felt my eyes rolling at how cliche some of this crap was. Uh-oh, our male lead bumps into a girl. He's blue and she's pink, so we know which one is the boy dinosaur and which is the girl dinosaur. Oh, look at that. They accidentally touch hands. How romantic. Like, bruh, couldn't the writers think of any other ways to introduce the two rather than ripping whole chapters straight out of the Hallmark playbook? That's doing a disservice to Hallmark. As cringy as the romance was at first, it somehow managed to win me over by the end. You see, Nira isn't as extreme as her brother, so when he's being ruthless towards the weak and even the young, she begins questioning this survival of the fittest mentality. A shared compassion for the little guy draws her closer to Aladar until the two lead a mutiny in the end. What started off super forced ended up being pretty compelling. My favorite character, though, has got to be Bruton, Kron's right-hand man throughout their journey. This dude starts out in lockstep with his boss, being the most loyal follower who's all in on his beliefs. After being sent to scout ahead one night, Bruton gets maimed by a Carnotaurus, suffering severe injuries. Now the turns have tabled. He's the weak link who will only hold everyone back. Even after he's ditched, he's still holding on to his beliefs and readying himself to die. Dang, this movie goes so hard sometimes. You can see the conflict in him since there is some semblance of self-preservation and gratitude towards the leads who look after him, but has trouble assimilating these feelings into his already established views. This brings Bruton to one of the top 10 anime redemption arcs when he willingly gives his own life in an act of gratitude to collapse the cave entrance onto the attacking Carnotaurus so that the weaklings can live on. Self-sacrifice wasn't in Kron's playbook, but he's come around to helping out the little guys. Bruton and the cave sequence are hands down the best parts of the movie. So yeah, after we blow our noses for his death, the heroes escape the tunnel to finally arrive at the nesting grounds. If you've seen Dinosaur before, then you probably remember the ending. Aladar notices the nesting grounds main passage is blocked, goes back to find the herd, has a scuffle with Kron, who is absolutely nuts at this point, and then comes the remaining Carnotaurus. Since we're almost finished with the plot, I'll come back to it in a bit. Aladar galvanizes the group into standing their ground, actually scaring off the enormous predator, except Kron, who's left by himself, becomes easy prey. It would have been hilariously ironic if he himself was left to die, though that goes against Aladar's philosophy, so of course he and Nira join the fight. The two are successful in pushing the carnivore off a cliff, but unfortunately Kron died in the battle. While I found the conflict engaging between him and the protagonist, as a character, I don't know, he doesn't receive the same depth as Bruton. Even if he wants to remain stuck in his ways, the writers couldn't get me to care for him quite as much. Maybe they went too far with Kron to allow us to feel for him. Sending children to their impending doom? Yeah, sorry bro, that's crazy. After his death though, the rest of the herd goes Aladar's way through the caves into the Dollar Store Great Valley, where everyone lives happily ever after. Our romantic leads clap cheeks, have eggs, and the credits roll. Epic. Now, going back to the Carnotaurus, about time I talk about these guys. I have mixed feelings here. First off, why isn't anyone allowed to say the genus name Carnotaurus? Everyone only just calls them the Carnotaurs.
A what?
I really don't understand the logic behind this decision. Like, why can't we say their name right? Next, it's ludicrous how huge these things get, attaining kaiju sizes. I know I'm not supposed to be judging scientific accuracy, but it's really distracting when we get a bunch of normal-ish looking dinosaurs, and then Godzilla. At least Matthew Broderick wasn't around for this one. Despite being goofy, their monstrous form does let us see a bit of Kron's perspective. These enormous killing machines are in constant pursuit of the herd. Death lurks around every corner, so you'd want to get to safety as soon as possible. Slowing down for the unfit may put everyone straight into the jaws of the Carnotaurus. The stakes, the tension, and the main ideological conflict may not have had the same punch if we saw Carnotaurus smaller than the Iguanodons. Also, not including the size or the science, This is a striking model. The theropod it's based on is already super unique and memorable. Unlike some other creature designs which actually remove the remarkable qualities, Disney's Dinosaur embraces the weirdness to create unforgettable antagonists. We see those bizarre horns, spiky osteoderms running down the sides, those iconic puny arms that were essentially big wrists, a blunt face, and an unusual yet effective reddish hot pink coloration. It's a bold strategy and it pays off for them. While a bit stylized, the animators didn't need to change much to make an awesome animal. Probably the most memorable thing in the movie are the so-called Carnotaurs. All these years later, I still vividly remembered them before my rewatch. Lastly on them, it's cool to see a previously obscure dinosaur on screen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this may have been the first pop culture portrayal of this predator, since it was only discovered back in 1984, then named in
1985.
Actually, we can apply this to many of the featured animals. Rather than going with the most popular or recognizable species, many B and C listers made the cut. Instead of Tyrannosaurus, we get Carnotaurus. Instead of Triceratops, there's Styracosaurus and Pachyrhinosaurus. Velociraptors are actual velociraptors instead of roided out Deinonychus. Instead of Edmontosaurus, Trachodon, Anatosaurus, Anatotitan, or whatever the heck they would have called it, our lead is an Iguanodon, which, dare I say, had fallen off since the 1800s. Heck, instead of Pachycephalosaurus, there's Shrekking Stygimoloch. Well, still Pachycephalosaurus as it turns out. The only real big names we get are Brachiosaurus and Ankylosaurus, and one of them's a dog. I don't want to contradict my latest Jurassic World video here. I'm not advocating for dumping as many different dinos on screen as possible, just saying it's cool how the creators selectively chose to fill out the cast with more obscure names. One last major point before we close out this classic. I 100% appreciate many of the darker moments present. Yes, Dinosaur's PG, and yes, the target audience is mainly kids and families, but that doesn't mean you have to bubble wrap everything. Good on the filmmakers here for trusting their audience, giving us credit to handle more mature moments. Of course, this movie's not overly brutal or gory or violent just for the sake of it, but we're trusted to handle death and tragedy. These are dinosaurs. They die. It's what they do. At some points, even I had to pause and say,
That's rough, buddy.
much of the film wouldn't work if there were no real stakes. If nobody died, then who'd care about the Carnotaurus? Who'd care if the weak were being sacrificed? Who'd care about Aladar's quest to help the little guys in an unforgiving world? It would all feel so hollow without real consequences to each character's actions. Adults like me can still watch this on the edge of our seats because someone can actually die, unlike other pure sugar-coated kids movies. So you cannot tell a story like this without death being a real possibility, and I'm so glad that the creators had faith in their audience to handle it. In regards to the story and the entertainment value, that's all I have to say about Disney's 2000 release, Dinosaur. Although not perfect, because no movie is, I still had a great time watching. It deserves a lot more credit than I gave it for all these years. I got a lot of great characters, a cool soundtrack, a conflict I can get behind, high stakes that provide good tension, and the visuals haven't aged much in the 24 years since. Put it simply,
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
definitely worth the watch if you haven't, or if it's been a long time, go back, give it another chance like I did. Now, in the next video, I'll be returning to see how it holds up scientifically. Until then, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and to check out my social media. See you next time.